guys, welcome back to my channel. So we have learned about like what Java program basically is, like what Java in general is. Today we are going to dive more into more fundamentals like what are variables, data types, and all. So let's start with what is variables in Java. So a term variable suggests that something that could be varied. So there is a concept of like constants and variables. A constant is that the value is going to be constant for all over the program itself, but the variable, its value can be changed. Like we can update the value of a variable itself. So in general, in any programming language, a variable is sort of a container that is used to store some value. But the languages like Java or even in other languages, we have to specify what type of values we are going to store into it. The general concept is that suppose we have to store two different material like the water and the sugar. So we cannot store the sugar in the bottle and the water in the sack, right? We have to store the water in the bottle and the sugar in the sack. So similar is the concept here. To store different type of values, we have different type of containers. To store string value, we have different container. To store integer value, we have different container. But we have to also tell what sort of value we are going to store inside the variable. And then we have to give it a label so that whenever we want to access that value, we can use that label to access that value. So variable is a container in a Java program that which holds the value while the Java program executes. And then there are certainly different type of variables. We'll come back to that later. So, and this is how, like, these are examples. Suppose this container is used to store string values. Like a string is a collection of characters, like any number of characters. And we give it a name as name, like we give it a label as name. So we can store any string value inside this container. And then the other container is a Boolean type of container where we can store a Boolean value, whether it's a true or false, whether a value is true or false. And then we give it a label of winner. And then there is third container, which is like integer kind of container. We can store the integer values inside of it. And then we give it a label of name. So what's the difference between these containers? Though the diagram, they look same, but there is a difference. So this is how we create a variable in Java. We have to tell what type of data we are going to store, whether it's an integer, it's a float, it's a string, it's a Boolean, or whatever. And then we'll give it a label, like what the X is the label. Whenever we want to access this variable, we'll use this label X. And then this 20 is the actual value that is stored inside the container. Okay, let me show it more clear visualization of what variables are. So suppose this is our memory. So inside of memory, okay, we have different locations where we can store values. And suppose we have to store the area of some carpet or some land or something. So there is a area of 100 meters square, let's say. So the label is gonna be area itself, the name area. And the value we want to store is 100. So now this is, because this is an integer value, so we have to tell it that it is going to be an integer variable, right? So now what is going to happen, it's going to store, let's say we are going to store it here in this chunk. So we'll store 100 here, and then we'll give it a label of area. Right. So now what's the difference is that, suppose now we have to say, like, if the area is occupied or not. So let's say we have to create a new variable. Let's say occupied. And then we said, no, this area is not occupied. So we said false. So the thing is there, because this is a Boolean value, right? So we have to tell it that this is going to be a Boolean value. Bool, okay. So now, if to store this value, we need some space, right? So we'll store false here, let's say. So now the difference between these two containers is that this container, like this integer, is going to occupy 4 bytes of memory, 4 bytes. But this Boolean is going to occupy only 1 byte of memory. So this is the general concept of like, why do we need to specify what type of variable it is going to be? And then definitely string occupies more, like the floats and double occupies more than integer itself. So, and the character occupies only 1 byte. And the different, like we'll talk about it later in the more detail, but yeah, for now, this is the general concept of like telling Java how, like what type of value we are going to store, so that Java could allocate that particular memory, like that particular chunk of memory, to our variable itself. Okay, so there are three types of variable. There is a local variable, which is declared inside the function, and it cannot be declared static. Now, static means, like we have already talked about, we don't have to create a variable like the class to access it, and this is going to be static. So in general, like we are talking about the local variable. So local variable is something that is created inside the function, and that it cannot be accessed outside of the function. Okay, let's say we do have a function, let's say area. So it's a public, it is going to return integer value, and then the function name is area itself. And then yeah, we can like get some values, like we can get the length, and then we can also get the width. So now this function, inside the function, we create a variable called int area, and then whatever we do, length into breadth, whatever, length into width, whatever, and then we can return this thing. So this return, let's say area. So this variable, okay, this variable itself, this variable is a local variable to this function area. So this is called a local. We cannot, like, if we want to access this variable outside of this function area, we cannot access it because it is created inside this function. So it is local to this function itself. And now let's talk about like instance variable are those variables that are not inside any function but are inside the class itself, but they cannot be static as well. Like static variables are different, and then instant variable are different. So instant variables are those which are not inside any function. They are like global to all the functions. They are declared inside the class. Like suppose this is our class. We do have a different function. Let's say class, and give it a name of A. Then we have like main function or method, and then we have area function, and then other functions as well. So this variable, like if we create a variable outside of any, like int, let's say length equals to 20. So this variable is an instance variable that is inside the class but not local to any method, but it is accessible to all, and it is not also static. And then there is third type of like variable that are static variables, and the main thing is that they are going to be static for all, and then they cannot be a local variable. So this is in general like what let's see in the programming itself, like how variable works. So this was our last program. So now let's say instead of like printing some values, hello world, now we are going to print some values, like say let's say area itself, area. So because there is no area, that's why it's showing us the error. There is no variable called area, so we have to create a variable for that. And let's say we have created a new variable called int area equals to 100. So now there is no issue. Now we can print the variable 100 itself. Now let's run the program. So now this program says the like print the 100 itself. Like let's say we print this thing, area of land, and then we print this area itself. So now it will print this. The area of land is 100. The area of land is 100. Now let's clear this. Now what happened? The variable, because we can change the value. So suppose initially we declare it as 100, but later we can definitely update this thing. We can do like area equals to now 120. It is increased by 20. Now if we print this area again, it will not show us the 100 itself, but instead it will show like 120. Let's save the program and then run it. Now we can see the area of land is 120 instead of like 100. Instead we can do this, like we can display both the areas, 120 like before updating and after updating as well. So now we can say before updating area of land is 100, but after updating area of land is 120. So this variable is local to this main function. Like if we create any function that is outside of main function, then definitely we cannot use this area variable. And if you have to create an instance variable, we have to create it here. And if you have to create a static variable, we have to put the keyword static there. Okay, this is all about the variables. So now let's talk about the data types in Java. So in Java, data types are broadly divided into two types, like that is like primitive data types, and then there are non-primitive data types. So primitive data types are those for which Java has fixed everything. Like we cannot that are non-customizable. Like Java has already decided how much amount of memory they are gonna take and then what type of data they are gonna store. But the non-primitive data types are those which are bit of customizable, and then also in some cases we can like store different type of variables or different type of data inside these non-primitive data types. So because we are learning basics, so we are going to cover only primitive data types in this lecture, and later definitely we are going to cover non-primitive data types as well. So again, now primitive data types are divided into like booleans and then numerics. So booleans are those like where we can only store boolean values that are like whether it's true or false. But in numeric data types, there are like characters and then integrals. So in characters, so character is something that is like single alphabet stored inside like wraparound single quotes is called a character, and then when we have collection of characters wraparound double quotes is called a string. So now this is like what is character is. Like if you have to declare character, we have to tell like we have to do char, and then we have to put the value like the single alphabet inside the single quotes is going to be a character. Now let's talk about the integrals. So integrals could be like either integers or floating values. The difference between the integers and floating values is that like integers are whole numbers and floating points are like decimal values or floating values after with the whole numbers. So there are multiple types of integers that are, it could be bytes, short, int, or long. The difference is that they are going to occupy different amount of memory and they are like able to store different like values. Like if suppose short is able to store only value from 0 to 9, then int might be able to store from 0 to 99, and long is able to store from 0 to 999. So this is the difference, and they are going to occupy different amount of memory. Similar is in the concept of the floats and double. They're going to store the floating values, but the more precise value could be stored in doubles in comparison to floats. So whenever we don't want to store much precise values, then we use floats. But when we are like dedicated to store more precise value, then in that case we have to use the doubles. But both are going to use floating values, and then also both are going to use different amount of memory. So let's demonstrate like how it should work. So let's scroll down and suppose this is our memory again. This is our memory where we have multiple locations. Like we can store data in different locations definitely. And suppose there is again a variable called area or something, int variable, and let's say age. Someone is 19 years old. So now to store this variable, we need like because integer takes 4 bytes of memory, 4 bytes. So it will take 4 bytes in the memory itself. Like integer will occupy these 4 bytes. To store the integers, we need 4 bytes of memory, and then it will occupy this all space. But now we have to say like if that person, let's say, is a student or not. Is a student, so we have to tell it like it's gonna be boolean. Sure. See, let me do it black. Boolean is a student. And let's say it's he or she is a student. It's a true. To store this value, we need to occupy like we need only 1 byte of memory. That means it could be stored in here. So this Boolean value could be stored in 1 byte of memory, but integer value requires 4 byte of memory. So in general, this is how things work. And like if I talk about like how because computer understand only low-level language that is zeros and ones. So like so how we represent is that like we'll talk about it later in detail. But yeah, suppose we have to write 1, so it will be written as like 0 0 0 1 because computer understand only zeros and 1. So the 3 zeros goes here like 0 0 0, and then 1 will go here. We have to write 2, so it will be like 0 0 1 0. 3 is gonna be like 0 0 1 1, and so on. Like 4 is gonna be like 0 1 0 0, and so on. Like 8 is gonna be something like 1 0 0 0. So this is how computer understand and works, and this is how it occupies space. Like what if we have to store some integer, it will occupy 4 bytes of memory, and if you have to like store a boolean, it will occupy only 1 byte. And same for the character, it will occupy only 1 byte. But for let's say for long or for a string, it might occupy 8 or more bytes of memory. according to the like data type what we are using. So now let's do some coding part so that we can uh, like understand it more clearly. So instead of printing this, let me delete this, and we set of sort of some we create some sort of game. Let's say we have to print like if a person, what's the name of the person, what's the age, and how far he lives from his office or his school, or and what grade he got. So let's say we create a variable, though we didn't learn about the strings yet, but yeah, to store it's a collection of characters and wrap around the double quotes. Let's say Alex, and after that, let's say his age is okay. I have to give it a name. If we forget to give it a label of name. Okay, now it's not showing the error, not yelling at us anymore. Now create a variable called int, and it's his age is, let's say he is 19-year-old, and then after that, let's say how grades, like grades, he got A grades, and then after that, let's say if he likes chocolate, so we have to tell it's a boolean value, likes chocolate. So let's say he don't like, we say false. And after that, like we can also create double values, like let's say double distance. So distance is, let's say, something 17.2. Okay, so now instead of like printing like using the single data type that is integer, we are going to use all the data types inside the one statement, and then we will print the like entire story about the Alex. So let me first clear the console itself, and then let us print it, and let's see like how different data types work. Let's say, so sout is gonna, like if you type the command sout, it will give you the system.out.println itself, so you don't have to worry about. Okay, now we have to tell the story about the Alex. We'll say I'm, and then we'll print this thing plus name. And because this is variable, definitely we can change it later. That's why we use that. That's the concept. Like else we have to change it, like do it manually each time. We have to change everything. But in this case, we can use this variable as many times as we can, and then we can change it one time, and it will change everywhere. So Alex, and then we can say I have to give it a full. We are creating a story, so we can do this like I am this year old plus age years old. Then I have to say grading. I've scored this plus grade. In my high school, and after that we can see the false, if the value is false, he like chocolate is, then we can give it like chocolate, and after that we can say he lives this much kilometers from his school. Okay, now so we have created the entire story by using different variables, like different sort of, with the help of different data types. Let's see what it's gonna print and what's gonna happen. So now let's run the program. So now we can see the entire story with the different values. Like we have used the different variables, different sort of data types as well. Like I'm Alex, I'm 19 years old, I've scored A grades in my high school. Then we started a new story, like the third person is telling like he likes chocolate is false. He lives 17.2 kilometers from his school. So these are like different data types and variables. Like we have used different variables and we have used different type of variables in it. So we have demonstrated like how different data types and variable work in Java. Now let's move to the last topic for today, that is keywords. So keywords are a reserved word that conveys a special meaning. That means we cannot use these words as a name of variables. But yeah, whenever we use these keywords, we mean to do something. Like in Java already defined that what this word is gonna mean. Like there is a word abstract to use like create something abstract, and then there is a like byte, case, to floats. Like float is a keyword. We to create a floating point, int is a keyword. To create an integer, we cannot use the int as a variable name because it already conveys a special meaning. That means we have to create an integer that only, and at that point we'll use this keyword int. We'll use import to import the packages. We will use chars and classes to. So these are in general, these are reserved word in Java that conveys a special meaning, and we cannot use these words as a name of variable or something. And we have to know, like we don't have to like memorize the meaning of all of them, because for now you don't have to memorize, just you need to know like keywords are reserved word, we cannot use them as a name of a variable. So I hope everything is clear up till now, and thanks for watching. And I would love to know in the comments like if anything I want to add, or if anything you want to learn more about the Java itself. Again, thanks for watching.